The chair was too wide for her. That was the first thing Yuna noticed when she sat down in it. The seat had been designed for the Pelori ambassador, who was roughly the size and shape of a refrigerator with opinions. Yuna was not. She was 28, 5'4", and sitting in a chair meant for a species that communicated through chest vibrations. Her feet didn't touch the floor. She tucked them underneath her and pretended that was a choice. The Galactic Council chamber on the Thisarca Ring was built to intimidate. 200 delegations arranged in a rising spiral, each seat carved from the stone of its homeworld, each lit from beneath so the delegates appeared to glow. The architecture said, "You are small, and the galaxy is ancient." Yuna had read about this room in academy briefings. The briefings hadn't mentioned the smell, like copper and old rain, something biological and metallic that clung to the recycled air. She was not supposed to be here. Ambassador Quan had picked up a respiratory virus on the transit shuttle, something his immune system handled like a personal insult, and now he was in a medical bay 3 decks below, coughing up fluids that the station doctors found academically fascinating. Yuna was his junior attaché. She carried his briefcase. She organized his notes. She had never spoken in the chamber. Today, she had to present Earth's corridor petition. The petition was simple. Earth leased access to hyperspace corridors through 3 separate treaties, each with tariffs that increased every 5 years. The tariffs had been designed with mathematical precision to keep humanity dependent on alien goodwill for the basic act of moving through space. Earth had been asking for a single permanent corridor for 4 years. Standard procedure. File the request, get denied, file again. Quan called it knocking on the door until they get tired of the noise. Yuna stood when Earth's slot came. She activated her datapad. She began reading the petition in a voice that was steady and clear, and carried exactly as far as the chamber's acoustics required. She got 9 sentences in. "If I may," said Ambassador Dren. Dren was Olkari, reptilian, 7 centuries old, scaled in a way that light seemed to slide off him like water off good leather. He sat 3 tiers above Yuna, in a chair carved from volcanic glass that his species had been sitting in for longer than humans had been writing things down. He didn't stand when he spoke. He didn't need to. "The Council has heard this petition before," Dren said. 4 times, if memory serves. And memory does serve. I was present for 3 of them. A ripple of amusement moved through the chamber. Not laughter yet. "I wonder if the Earth delegation might explain what has changed since their last submission. Have they discovered new physics? Built new infrastructure? Or are they simply hoping that repetition functions as persuasion?" More ripples. Yuna stood still. "I ask because this council's time is not unlimited," Dren continued. "And while we appreciate the enthusiasm of younger species, and Earth is, let us be clear, the youngest species in this chamber by a margin that is almost endearing, we must allocate our attention to matters of substance." The laughter came now. Not from everyone. Enough. Valith, the trade coordinator of the Sciphis Consortium, unfolded 2 of her forearms in a gesture that meant she wanted to add something. The gesture also looked, to human eyes, like a shrug that had grown extra limbs. "If the Council will permit a data point," she said, her voice clicking between syllables like a keyboard made of bone. "Earth's total gross domestic product represents approximately 0.3% of the consortium's quarterly trade volume. Their entire economy is a line item we round down." She paused. "I say this with respect." She did not say it with respect. The chamber moved on. Dren formally motioned to table all future Earth corridor petitions for 50 standard years. The motion passed without a formal vote, a procedural move that meant not enough delegations opposed it to trigger a count. Earth's petition didn't die. It was something worse than dead. It was irrelevant. Yuna watched the holographic tally flicker and settle. 50 years. She would be 78. Everyone who had built Earth's diplomatic program from nothing would be retired or buried, and the next generation would walk into this chamber and sit in this too-wide chair and start the whole process over from a position even weaker than today. She did not react. She sat back down. Her feet still didn't reach the floor. She opened her datapad. She typed 8 words. She sent the message to a secure channel that bounced through 9 relay stations and arrived on Earth 4 hours later, encrypted in a format that would look like routine diplomatic chatter to anyone who intercepted it. Then she closed the pad, thanked the council for its time in a voice that betrayed nothing, and walked out of the chamber. Her shoes made small sounds on the stone floor. The consortium's agricultural subsidy debate had already begun, and Yuna was to 200 species exactly what they had always believed her to be. A junior attaché from a planet that still cooked its food. The door closed behind her. The chamber continued. The galaxy turned. 4 hours later and 8 light-years away, Fleet Admiral Dohan sat in his office on the 42nd floor of the United Earth Space Force headquarters in Sejong City. The office was plain. A desk, a chair that fit him, a window that faced the river. He had a cup of barley tea that was going cold because he kept forgetting to drink it. This was a man who had welded hull plates in the Busan shipyards when he was 19, who had grease-stained scars on his forearms that no amount of rank could buff out, and who ran the most powerful military Earth had ever assembled with the energy of someone who was slightly tired but would get to it. His datapad chimed. 8 words on a screen. He set down his tea. He looked at the river for a moment. The water was doing what water does, moving without caring who watched. He picked up his phone and said one sentence. Wake up, Mireille. 12 hours after the summit, Earth's diplomatic communication channel, the one that ran through 17 relay stations and took 4 hours each way, stopped transmitting. It didn't fail. There was no error, no static, no degraded signal. It simply stopped, the way a person stops talking when they have decided that talking is finished. 14 species noticed within the first hour, not because they were monitoring Earth specifically, but because Earth's channel carried background data, trade confirmations, shipping manifests, sensor calibrations that fed into larger systems the way a small river feeds a lake nobody thinks about until it dries up. The lake didn't dry up immediately, but the water level dropped, and the species that lived along its edges began to feel something they could not yet name. Nobody panicked. Outages happened. Relay stations needed maintenance. Humanity was young and its infrastructure was held together with clever engineering and what the Olkari privately called an impressive tolerance for duct tape. The assumption was that it would come back online within a day. 2 at most. It did not come back online. While the galaxy waited for a signal that was never coming, Mireille sat in a bunker beneath what used to be the Korean demilitarized zone. The DMZ had been repurposed 40 years ago into Earth's treaty archive, a climate-controlled vault buried under 100 meters of granite and history. The irony was not lost on Mireille. A border built to keep 2 halves of a country apart was now the room where humanity kept every promise it had ever made to the stars. She was 60 years old. Her hair was gray and cut short, because she didn't have time for it to be anything else. She wore reading glasses that she didn't need. Her vision had been corrected decades ago, but the glasses helped her think. She had explained this once to a colleague who asked, and the colleague had stared at her, the way people stare at someone who has just told them they keep a lucky rock in their pocket. Mireille did not care. The glasses worked. She had built these treaties, all 142 of them, co-authored, revised, negotiated across languages that didn't share grammar, across species that didn't share biology, across cultures that didn't share the concept of a handshake. She had spent 30 years making Earth's word mean something in a galaxy that had no reason to trust it. And into every single agreement, she had planted a door. Not a backdoor. Mireille hated that word. Backdoors were for people who planned to cheat. What she had built were sunset clauses, legal provisions that allowed unilateral withdrawal if specific conditions were met. The conditions were buried deep. Article 9, subsection 14c of the Sci-Fi Trade Compact contained a definition of material breach that hinged on a semicolon. The Olkari Non-Aggression Pact tied its validity to continued diplomatic recognition of petitioning rights, recognition that the Council had just stripped from Earth by tabling its corridor petitions for 50 years. The Venturi Resource Sharing Agreement required annual, good-faith affirmation that was technically due 6 hours ago and had not been sent. Every clause was legal, every trigger was real, and every single one had been designed so that only Earth could pull it. Mireille had not done this because she was paranoid. She had done it because she had sat in enough rooms with enough alien diplomats to understand one thing clearly. The galaxy did not respect Earth. It tolerated Earth. And tolerance was a lease that could be revoked at any time by anyone for any reason. And the tenant would have no recourse because the landlord had written all the rules. So Mireille wrote her own rules, quietly, in the footnotes, where nobody looked. She sat in her chair in the bunker and opened 142 files on her screen. She had a cup of black coffee that was still hot because she never forgot to drink it. Behind her, 3 legal analysts sat at their own terminals, cross-referencing each withdrawal notice against galactic contract law databases that Earth had been quietly mirroring for the past decade. Mireille had trained them herself. They were thorough in the way that people are thorough when they understand that a missed comma could start a war. At 0600 UTC, Earth transmitted. Not a message, not a negotiation, not a request for dialogue. 142 withdrawal notices sent simultaneously to every species, coalition, consortium, hegemony, and collective that had ever signed an agreement with humanity. Each notice cited the specific sunset clause. Each clause had been triggered by actions the other parties had taken themselves. The tabling of petitions, the missed affirmations, the lapsed recognitions. Earth was not breaking its word. Earth was pointing out, with the calm precision of a lawyer reading a contract back to someone who hadn't read it in the first place, that the other side had broken theirs. Trade compacts, gone. Non-aggression pacts, dissolved. Technology sharing agreements, corridor leases, mutual defense clauses, immigration protocols, scientific exchange programs, all of it. 30 years of interstellar diplomacy undone in a single transmission that took 4 seconds to send. The galaxy received it at different times, depending on distance. The Sci-Fi Consortium got it first, because they were closest. Valith was in her office, reviewing quarterly freight reports, when her terminal lit up with 17 simultaneous alerts. She read the first withdrawal notice, then the second. By the 5th, her antenna had gone rigid, a posture her species associated with the moment before a predator strikes, which was not far from what was happening. She ran the numbers. Earth had been the only species willing to haul consortium cargo through the Kepler stretch, an irradiated corridor that melted the shielding on every alien ship that tried to cross it. Human engineers had solved the radiation problem 8 years ago with a hull alloy that the consortium had dismissed as brute force metallurgy. 14 species depended on that route. 14 species had just lost it. Dren received his notice on the Olkari homeworld, in a study lined with books printed on materials that predated human agriculture. Not because he didn't understand it. Because he did. The withdrawal from the Non-Aggression Pact meant that the Olkari's largest border, the one facing Sol, was now unprotected by any legal framework. His military advisors would need to be briefed. His military advisors would not enjoy the briefing. On Earth, Jisoo sat in her office in the Xenotechnological Acquisitions Building and waited. She had a list of every alien technology Earth had ever licensed: drive cores, sensor arrays, medical scanners, agricultural processors, all of it now unlicensed. All of it already reverse-engineered, rebuilt, and improved in facilities that the galaxy didn't know existed, because Jisoo had made sure the paperwork described them as agricultural research stations. Her terminal chimed. A direct communication request from Valith. Valith's face filled the screen, compound eyes, mandibles twitching, antennae still rigid. "We require clarification on the scope of these withdrawal notices," Valith said. Her voice was controlled. Her clicking was not. Jisoo smiled. It was a warm smile. The kind of smile that a shopkeeper gives you right before they tell you they're closing for the season, and they're not sure when they'll reopen. "All clarification requests should be routed through Earth's new diplomatic liaison office," Jisoo said. "Which office?" "The one we haven't opened yet." Jisoo tilted her head. "We'll let you know." She disconnected. Her screen went dark. She picked up her coffee. It was the same brand Mireille drank. They had worked together long enough to share a supplier. And she held it with both hands, because the mug was warm and the room was cold. And there was something satisfying about holding a warm thing while the galaxy figured out it was winter. The silence lasted 7 days. 7 days during which the Sol system became the quietest place in the galaxy. Not because nothing was happening inside it, but because nothing was coming out. No signals, no ships, no light that wasn't starlight. The borders of human-controlled space, that modest sphere around a modest yellow sun, went dark, the way a house goes dark when the people inside it have decided they are done answering the door. The galaxy had seen species go to war. It had seen species collapse, fragment, surrender, evolve past the need for bodies. It had never seen a species simply stop talking. War was understandable. Silence was not. Silence meant something was being built, or something was being decided, and the galaxy could not tell which one was worse, because the galaxy could not see inside. On the Thesarca ring, the Council's communication office ran continuous scans on every Earth frequency they had on record. A junior Olkari analyst suggested that Earth's comm infrastructure might have failed. A systemic collapse, perhaps a solar event. His senior officer looked at him the way a teacher looks at a student who has confidently written the wrong answer in large letters. "Their comms didn't fail," the senior officer said. "They turned them off. Those are different problems." Inside the dark sphere, Dohan worked. He did not work the way the galaxy expected a human admiral to work. The galaxy's intelligence profiles on Dohan described him as competent but limited by species-typical aggression patterns, which was a polite way of saying they expected him to do something loud and stupid. This was because the galaxy had spent 87 years studying humanity through the lens of its own assumptions, and its assumptions said that young species were emotional, reactive, and easy to predict. Dohan repositioned the entire United Earth Space Force into a defensive shell around Sol. Not a battle formation, a cocoon. Ships arranged in overlapping sensor fields, each one watching a different angle of approach, each one running silent. No active transmissions, no engine flares. The fleet communicated through tight beam laser pulses that couldn't be detected from more than a few thousand kilometers away. To anyone scanning from outside, the Sol system looked empty, dead, a species that had packed up and gone home. The flagship Murado sat at the edge of the Oort cloud, drifting among ice and ancient rock. Captain Tejo stood on its bridge and watched his displays show nothing, which was exactly what he wanted them to show. He had put the ship into what his crew called ghost mode. Minimum power, minimum heat signature, maximum patience. The Murado was the largest warship Earth had ever built, and right now, it was pretending to be a comet. Taeho was good at waiting. He had grown up on Jeju Island, where his grandmother had been a haemyo, a sea diver, who harvested abalone from the ocean floor without any breathing equipment. She had taught him that the ocean didn't care about your schedule. You went down when the current allowed it, you came up when your lungs demanded it, and everything in between was patience and pressure. Taeho had applied this philosophy to naval warfare, with results that his instructors at the academy had described as unconventional, and his enemies had described less politely. While the fleet waited, Jisu's department moved. The Office of Xenotechnological Acquisitions occupied a building in Daejeon that looked, from the outside, like a mid-sized insurance company. This was on purpose. Inside, 300 engineers and analysts worked on projects that the galaxy would have found troubling if the galaxy had known about them. Every piece of alien technology that Earth had ever licensed, purchased, borrowed, or been gifted had passed through this building, and every piece had been taken apart, studied, understood, and rebuilt using human materials and human methods. The licenses were gone now. The voided treaties had seen to that. But the knowledge wasn't gone. Knowledge doesn't care about paperwork. Jisu had spent 15 years building a parallel technological base that didn't depend on alien supply chains, alien patents, or alien permission. The galaxy thought Earth needed its technology. Earth had needed its technology 5 years ago. Now Earth needed it the way a grown adult needs training wheels. It didn't, but it had kept them on because removing them would have raised questions. The questions were no longer a concern. 3 light-years away, the consortium's problems were getting worse. Valeth stood in her operations center and watched her freight network develop holes. 31% of interstellar cargo moved through Earth-maintained relay stations, automated platforms that boosted signals, coordinated jump timing, and kept ships from arriving inside each other. Those relays were offline. Not destroyed, not damaged. Just off, sitting in the dark, like sleeping animals that might wake up or might not, and nobody wanted to get close enough to check. Trade didn't stop, trade slowed, and in an economy built on just-in-time delivery across light years of vacuum, slow was a disease that spread faster than fast. Perishable goods rotted in cargo holds. Manufacturing planets missed raw material shipments and idled their factories. 3 colony worlds, small ones, frontier settlements that depended on regular supply runs, sent distress signals that the consortium had to reroute through backup channels that added 2 days to the response time. 2 days was not a crisis. 2 days was the beginning of a crisis, the way a crack in a dam is the beginning of a flood. Valeth filed 17 resource reallocation requests in a single day. Her staff had never seen her file more than 3. Her antennae stayed rigid from morning until she forced them down at night, manually, the way a person forces their jaw to unclench. On the Alkari homeworld, Dren received a briefing that he had not requested and did not enjoy. His intelligence directorate had conducted a full audit of Alkari military positioning relative to human space. The audit revealed something that Dren found personally offensive. Earth's sensor buoys, small, cheap, ugly devices that the Alkari had permitted as a diplomatic courtesy because they were too primitive to matter, had been mapping Alkari fleet movements for a decade. Every patrol route, every ship rotation, every training exercise. The buoys transmitted on frequencies so low that Alkari sensors had classified them as background radiation. They were not background radiation, they were eyes. And they were still on. Earth had gone silent, but its sensor network had not. Someone on the human side had made a deliberate decision to keep watching while everything else went dark. Dren understood the message without needing it translated. We see you. We have always seen you. And now you know that we see you, which means every move you make from this point forward is a move we're watching you make. Dren was 7 centuries old. He had navigated political crises that predated human written language. He was not frightened, but he was, for the first time in a very long while, paying attention. The council called an emergency session on day 8. The chamber was full. The mood was not the languid superiority of the Centennial Summit. It was something tighter, something that sat in the room like pressure before a storm. Dren proposed dispatching a diplomatic envoy to Earth. A senior delegation, escorted by military vessels, to open dialogue and determine humanity's intentions. High Arbiter Fennec, who chaired the session, asked the obvious question: who would lead the envoy? The chamber went quiet. Not the polite silence of consideration. The heavy silence of 200 species realizing that going to Earth meant entering the dark. It meant flying into a sphere of silence, where human ships sat invisible among the ice, where human sensors tracked every movement, where the rules of engagement were written in a language the galaxy hadn't bothered to learn. Fennec waited. No one spoke. He closed his outer eyelids, which in his species was the equivalent of a sigh, and said he would go himself. Because someone had to, and the silence had lasted long enough to make everyone in the chamber understand something they had not understood 2 weeks ago. Earth was not asking to be let back in. Earth was waiting to see if anyone was smart enough to come knocking. The convoy entered the Sol system on day 12. 3 ships, Fennec's diplomatic cruiser, flanked by 2 Alkari escort vessels that bristled with enough weaponry to glass a small moon. The escorts were not technically necessary for a diplomatic mission. They were technically there as a standard precaution. Everyone involved understood what the precaution was for, and everyone involved understood that it would not be enough if things went wrong, and everyone involved pretended not to understand either of these things, because pretending was the only thing holding the mission together. They crossed the Oort cloud boundary at standard approach speed. The escorts ran active scans in every direction, painting the void with sensor pulses that returned nothing but ice and rock, and the ancient debris of a solar system that had been forming planets since before the Alkari invented fire. Then the Mirado appeared. It did not power up from some hidden position. It had been there the entire time, sitting dark among the frozen bodies of the outer system, and it simply turned its lights on. One ship. Running lights first, then navigational arrays, then the slow blue glow of its main reactor, coming to visible output. It was like watching a mountain decide to open its eyes. The Alkari escort captains, who had been trained to remain calm in combat situations involving up to 12 simultaneous hostile contacts, both reached for their weapons consoles. Their hands stopped halfway. The Mirado was not targeting them. It was not even facing them. It was simply there, the way a cliff is there when you realize you've been walking toward the edge. Tejo opened a single communication channel. His voice was unhurried. He identified himself, confirmed the convoy's diplomatic status, and transmitted a pre-recorded message from Admiral Dohan. The message was brief. Earth would receive 1 representative, unarmed, alone. The representative would be transported to the surface by human shuttle. The escort vessels would hold position at the Oort cloud boundary. They were welcome to keep their weapons hot. It would not matter, but they were welcome to it. Fennec agreed. He did not consult with the escort captains. He stepped into the human shuttle, a vehicle that was smaller than his personal bathroom, and smelled like recycled air, and something faintly metallic that he later learned was coffee, and he was taken to Earth. The shuttle descended through clouds over a peninsula that jutted into gray water. Fennec watched through the viewport as the planet resolved from abstraction into detail. Cities, rivers, mountains, the green-brown patchwork of land that had been farmed and built and fought over for 10,000 years. He had seen planets before, hundreds of them. This one looked ordinary, That was, he was beginning to suspect, the point. They landed in Sejong City. Fennec was escorted through clean, quiet hallways into a building that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed architecture should do its job and then get out of the way. No ornamentation, no displays of power. He was taken to a conference room on the 14th floor. A table, chairs, windows that looked out over a river. Yuna was there. She sat at the far end of the table with her hands folded, wearing the same dark suit she had worn at the council summit. She looked exactly the same as she had 2 weeks ago, composed, still, her eyes carrying that particular quality of attention that Fennec had mistaken for passivity the first time he'd seen it, and was not going to mistake again. Mireille was there, older, gray-haired, glasses she didn't need. She had a stack of physical documents in front of her. Actual paper, which Fennec found almost charmingly primitive, until he realized that paper couldn't be hacked, intercepted, or remotely accessed. And then he found it something else entirely. Dohan was there. Not in uniform. He wore civilian clothes, a dark jacket, no insignia, no medals. He was drinking barley tea from a ceramic mug that had a small chip on the rim. He looked like someone's uncle. He looked like someone who fixed things around the house on weekends. He did not look like a man who commanded a fleet that had just made 200 species nervous enough to send an amphibian judge across 8 light-years to ask what was happening. "Arbiter Fennec," Dohan said. "Sit down. Would you like tea?" Fennec sat. He declined the tea. He had prepared a speech, 30 minutes of careful diplomatic language designed to open dialogue, establish frameworks, and move toward resolution without committing to anything. He got 2 sentences into it before Dohan raised a hand. "Let me save us both some time," Dohan said. He touched the table, and the air above it filled with light. A holographic display bloomed across the room. Fennec's outer eyelids retracted fully, an involuntary response his species associated with the sudden need to see everything at once. The display showed Sol system in full 3-dimensional detail, and it was not the Sol system the galaxy knew. Earth's hidden infrastructure lit up like a nervous system being revealed beneath skin. Deep space manufacturing stations built inside hollowed-out asteroids in the belt between Mars and Jupiter, 17 of them, each producing hull alloys and weapons components at a rate that Fennec's mind refused to calculate. A second fleet deployed in the outer system, twice the size of anything Earth had ever declared to the Council. Sensor networks threading through the Kuiper Belt that made Earth's primitive buoys look like the decoys they had always been. And at the center of it all, pulsing with a quiet blue light, a prototype drive system that Fennec did not recognize. "That," said Jisoo, who had entered the room at some point without Fennec noticing, "is a point-to-point translocation drive. It doesn't use hyperspace corridors." She said this the way someone might mention that they had learned to cook a new dish. "We finished the prototype 8 months ago. It works." Fennec stared at the display. The corridors, the hyperspace corridors that the galaxy controlled, that Earth had been begging to access, that the Council had denied and taxed and weaponized, were irrelevant. Earth had built a door that didn't need a hallway. Her voice was level and dry, the voice of someone reading terms she had memorized decades ago. She explained, without emotion, that every treaty Earth had voided also carried restrictions, caps on fleet size, prohibitions on weapons development beyond certain thresholds, limits on colonization range, mandatory technology disclosures. Those restrictions were now void. The box the galaxy had built around Earth was open, and what had been growing inside it was not what the galaxy expected. Dohan let the display rotate in the air for a long moment. Then he turned it off. The room returned to what it was, a conference room, a table, a window, a river. "We don't want a war," Dohan said. "War is expensive and stupid, and the tea gets cold." He took a sip. "We want new treaties, equal ones." Here are the terms. He laid them out. Permanent corridor access. Though Earth no longer needed it, the principle mattered. A full council seat with voting rights. Reclassification from provisional member to sovereign peer. Renegotiation of all trade agreements at fair market rates. And one final item, delivered not by Dohan but by Mireille, who removed her glasses to say it, which somehow made it land harder. A formal public apology from Ambassador Dren, read into the council record, acknowledging that the tabling of Earth's petitions constituted a breach of diplomatic recognition. The apology would be written by Mireille, every word of it. Fennec processed this. He was a judge. He had arbitrated disputes between species that had been at war for longer than Earth had existed. He understood leverage. He understood theater. What he was seeing was both, performed with a precision that made him feel, for the first time in his long career, like the amateur in the room. He asked the question he had to ask. And if the council refuses? The room was quiet. Dohan looked at his tea. Jizu examined her fingernails. They were all waiting, Fennec realized, for the same person. Yuna spoke. She had not spoken since Fennec arrived. She had been sitting at the end of the table, still and composed. The same woman who had stood in the council chamber 2 weeks ago and been laughed at by 200 species. Then we stop being your neighbors, she said. Her voice was the same voice that had read the corridor petition, steady, clear, carrying exactly as far as it needed to. And we start being your horizon. Fennec did not ask what that meant. The holographic display was off, but he could still see it. The hidden fleet, the silent factories, the drive that didn't need their corridors. He can see it behind his eyelids when he blinked. He said he would bring the terms to the council. He stood. Dohan offered him tea again for the road. This time, Fennec accepted. It was good tea. The council reconvened on a Tuesday, though Tuesday meant nothing to most of the species present. The Ulcari measured time in volcanic cycles. The Sciphis marked days by the rotation of their hive mothers' moods. The Pelori didn't believe in days at all. They believed in productive intervals and resting intervals, which sounded efficient, until you learned that a Pelori resting interval could last 3 weeks and involved a kind of standing sleep that everyone agreed was unsettling to witness. It was, by human reckoning, 16 days since the summit, where Yuna had been laughed out of a chair that didn't fit her. The chamber was full, every seat occupied. Delegations that usually sent junior staff had sent their seniors. Species that hadn't attended a full session in decades had made the trip. The Thesarca ring hummed with a nervous energy that its environmental systems kept trying to filter out and couldn't, because anxiety is not a particle. Fennec stood at the central podium and delivered his report. He did not editorialize. He did not soften. He activated the same holographic display that Dohan had shown him, and he let the Sol system's hidden architecture speak for itself. The manufacturing stations, the second fleet, the sensor networks, the translocation drive that made hyperspace corridors as necessary as a horse-drawn carriage on a highway. The chamber watched. Nobody laughed. The silence was so complete that Fennec could hear the environmental systems working overtime, cycling air through filters that were not designed for this many bodies producing this much cortisol, or whatever the 200 different species in the room used instead of cortisol, when their bodies told them that something fundamental had changed. Dren sat in his volcanic glass chair and watched the display with the stillness of a species that had learned to survive by not moving when predators were nearby. His secondary eyelids flickered, a rapid, involuntary motion that other Ulcari in the chamber noticed and looked away from, because watching a senior ambassador lose control of his eyelid membranes was the reptilian equivalent of watching a general's hands shake. Fennec finished his report. He presented Earth's terms: permanent corridor access, full voting seat, sovereign peer status, trade renegotiation, and the apology. The chamber erupted, not in argument, but in the particular kind of noise that 200 species make when they are all trying to talk to their own delegations at once. A sound like a market collapsing and a cathedral filling at the same time. Fennox sat in his arbiter's chair and waited for it to pass, the way a man on a shore waits for a wave to finish. The vote took 3 hours, not because it was close, because every species wanted to be on record, and every species wanted their statement entered into the permanent archive, and every species wanted to make sure that history knew they had voted the right way. The council had a long memory. So did Earth. Nobody wanted to be on the wrong page of a book that both sides would be reading for centuries. The terms passed. Every single one. Even the apology. Dren descended from his tier to the central podium. He moved with the slow dignity of a creature that had 700 years of practice at appearing unhurried. He carried a datapad that contained the apology Mireille had written for him. He had read it 14 times. He had not changed a word, because the terms specified that the apology would be delivered as written, and because he had attempted to find a legal basis for rewording it, and discovered that Mireille had written the delivery clause with the same surgical precision she had used for everything else. He read the apology. His voice was steady. It acknowledged the tabling of Earth's petitions as a procedural failure. It acknowledged that dismissing a member species' formal request without substantive review constituted a breach of diplomatic recognition as defined under the Council's own charter. It acknowledged that language used during the session, and here Dren had to read his own words back to himself, which was a particular kind of punishment that Mireille had engineered with full awareness of its effect, had been inconsistent with the principles of mutual respect that the Council exists to uphold. The apology did not mention laughter. It didn't need to. The original transcript was attached as an appendix. Every joke, every chuckle, every click of Veilit's mandibles, preserved in the record like an insect in amber, dead, visible, and permanent. Dren finished. He returned to his seat. His secondary eyelids were still. Una signed the new treaties at the same table where she had been interrupted 16 days ago. The same chair, which still didn't fit her, though a maintenance crew had offered to adjust it, and she had declined. She signed 12 agreements in 40 minutes, each one reviewed by Mireille, who stood behind her like a shadow with reading glasses. The pen Una used was a standard-issue Earth diplomatic pen. Black ink, nothing special. It wrote on paper that would be scanned, archived, and preserved in a vault under the old DMZ, next to the ghosts of every treaty that had come before. After the signing, the chamber began to empty. Species filed out through corridors that suddenly felt narrower, though the architecture had not changed. Veilith found Jisoo in one of these corridors. She approached with 2 of her 4 arms folded, a posture that indicated she was not looking for a fight, which was itself a concession from a species that usually kept all arms available. "How long?" Veilith asked. No preamble, no diplomatic framing, just the question that had been eating at her since the withdrawal notices had arrived on her terminal. She counted on her fingers, theatrically, because Jisoo did most things theatrically when she knew someone was watching, and some things theatrically when no one was. "About 11 years, she said. 11 years. The exact length of Earth's provisional membership. The entire time the galaxy had been treating Earth like a junior partner, a charity case, a species that still cooked its food and taped its ships together and sat in chairs that didn't fit. Earth had been building. Every insult absorbed and converted into infrastructure. Every denied petition cataloged and fed into Mireille's legal architecture. Every dismissive intelligence assessment filed by the Olkari or the consortium read, noted, and used as a blueprint for what to hide next. Veilith's antenna went flat against her skull. In her species, it signified the moment a prey animal realizes it has been standing inside the predator's mouth the entire time. and the mouth has been patient. Jisoo smiled. She walked away. Her shoes made small sounds on the station floor, and this time, Valith watched her go. On the Mirado, anchored at a new position closer to the Thisarka ring than any human warship had ever been stationed, Captain Tejo stood at a viewport. The station rotated slowly in the middle distance, a wheel of light and politics turning against the black. His executive officer, a woman named Unji, who had been with him since his first command, and who communicated primarily through silence and raised eyebrows, stood next to him. "Is it over?" she asked. Tejo watched the station turn. Inside it, 200 species were rearranging themselves around a new center of gravity, adjusting trade routes, recalculating threat assessments, learning the name of a drive system that made their corridors obsolete, processing the understanding that the youngest species in the chamber had been the most patient, and that patience, when it comes from something strong enough to have chosen violence instead, is not a virtue. It is a warning. "It's not over," Tejo said. "It's just the first time they're seeing us with the lights on." Unji raised an eyebrow. Tejo took this as agreement. That night, station night, which was artificial and arbitrary, but which human bodies still needed because 10,000 years of evolution did not care about the politics of orbital habitats. Yuna sat alone in the Earth delegation's quarters. The quarters were being expanded. A construction crew from station maintenance was knocking out a wall to double the space, and the sound of their tools came through in muffled bumps, like a heartbeat behind drywall. She opened a file, the oldest one on the device, saved 16 days ago and not opened since. The 8-word message she had typed in a chair that didn't fit her, in a room full of species that didn't see her, on a day when the galaxy had looked at Earth and seen nothing worth respecting. They laughed. "Begin sundown. I'll stay here." 8 words, 2 sentences and a fragment. The first 2 words were a report. The next 2 were an order. The last 4 were a choice. To stay in the room where she had been humiliated. To sit in the chair that didn't fit. To be present for every moment of what came after. Because someone had to be Earth's face in this place. And Yuna had decided it would be hers. She set it on the table beside the diplomatic pen, which was out of ink now, because 12 treaties is a lot of signing, and Earth used real ink, because there was something about a permanent mark on physical paper that a digital signature could never replicate. She looked out the viewport. The galaxy looked back. For the first time in 11 years, it was looking back. Somewhere in the station, the construction crew knocked out the last piece of wall. The room got bigger. Yuna sat in it and did not feel small.